Welcome back, Bears fans, to another episode of the Chicago Audible. And would you look at that? We are now a week away from the 2021 NFL Draft. In just 7 days, we're going to find out what tricks Ryan Pace and the Chicago Bears have up their sleeves, if any. I'm Russell DeWitt, my co-host Nicholas Moriano. He's right here with me, and we are stoked that you are joining us for this Chicago Bears draft preview episodes. It's going to be a lot of fun, super informational, because we have a very special guest on with us today. It's a name that you should know, and if you don't, it's a great time to become acquainted with them. It is Jacob Infante, the draft expert over at Windy City Gridiron. He also has bylines over for the Draft Wire. Jacob, first of all, welcome aboard. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very glad to have you on here on Thursday, not Tuesday.
Yeah, I was just so eager to hop on the show that I completely mixed up the days and thought it was 2 days before. But regardless, it is worth the wait. I mean, I'm really excited to be able to hop on. You're right. It has been a long time coming. And because I've known both of you guys for quite a while. I met Will, I think it was 2 years ago now. And then I met Nick pretty soon after.
Yeah, I think you and I met, it was right before that magical 2018 season, the summer of 2018. Yeah. You were a student at a summer camp that I was running at the time. Well, not running. I was a counselor of, at the time, the High School Journalism Institute at Indiana University. You were there for a few days learning about sports media. You chose the wrong school. No, I'm kidding. But that's where we finally met in person. And that's one of my favorite stories I tell people about, just like this podcast and Bears Twitter in general, because you and I never met in person. We've talked on Twitter a lot. And then it was like, you're in the same room as I am. I was like, wait a minute, checking your name. Like, you're Jacob and you're Will. And I was no idea. So it's so cool how that all kind of worked out. But have you met Nick in person? I forgot if you two have actually met in person.
We have. I remember, I think twice now we've met in person, because it was the first time was at a training camp. I don't remember what year. I want to say 2019 maybe. I think
Probably
it might be. Yeah, and then we
just met in Mobile.
Yeah, we just met down back in January, so we got to hang out, grab a bite. It was cool. So I've known y'all for quite a bit now, so it's exciting to be able to hop on the show.
I'm excited to have you on. This is the perfect time. I mean, you're the draft guy. I know it's Sunday after the draft. You're looking at next year's draft class. Like, you're already coming out with way too early predictions, or like guys that you like, and that level of, I'll call it geekitude when it comes to the draft classes is something that I'm really stoked to bring on here to learn more about. With me getting to this stage of my life and buying a house and moving and transitioning jobs, this offseason is probably the most removed I've been in terms of like actually doing my own personal homework. So that's why I'm bringing you on. I'm doing the, what do you want to call it? The Spark Notes version. Not really. We're going to get some really good insight from you here. But Jacob, you live and breathe NFL draft 24/7, 365. And on top of that, you're a Bears fan, so you're going to be able to bring some information from Bears lens. And we're going to not just look at guys from days 1 and days 2, but we're also going to look at some of those maybe lesser-known players in the mid to late rounds. But before we start throwing some questions your way, I do need to let everyone know that today's episode is brought to you by Danette May and Mindful Health LLC, featuring Danette May's top superfood product from her Earth Echo Foods line, Cacao Bliss. Because nothing feels better than being able to enjoy a rich, smooth, creamy chocolate and knowing you are doing something good for your body along the way. They start with 100% organic cacao beans that are naturally kissed from the sun, maintaining its miraculous health benefits. Then they blend it with turmeric, MCT oil, coconut, Himalayan sea salt, cinnamon, and black pepper for the perfect blend to make you feel like the best you ever have. And the result? It's to fall in love with a truly decadent, healthy, guilt-free chocolate, removing your cravings, facilitating weight loss, boosting your energy, and reducing your inflammation with one simple drink. And not only that, it's friendly with paleo, gluten-free, keto, vegan, and vegetarian diets. And for the last 8 years, they've been a leader in the superfoods market, and they are proud to have served over millions of customers worldwide. That is the wrong one. Where did it go? Hold on a minute. Wrong buttons. I have to cover Nick's face with the promo code, because you can get 15% off by visiting earthechofoods.com/Minute Media and use the code MINUTE15. That's MINUTE 15. And I actually got my hands on some of this earlier this week. And by the way, it tastes so good and it's extremely versatile. It also comes with a recipe book. That way you can always find different ways to use it. I believe this weekend we're going to try some pancakes and maybe even some avocado pudding with it. So it's something I'm really looking forward to. And I know Nick's technically looking over it right now here on your screen. But all right, before I get too hungry, let's go ahead and get back to the task at hand, and let's go ahead and dive on in. And Jacob, I was really debating how I wanted to start this show because there's one position above the rest that all Bears fans are talking about, and I figured let's just start with it. It's quarterback. Everyone's going to be waiting to hear this stuff, so I want to make sure we hit it on the top of the episode here. So I want to begin with just gaining your opinion as a quarterback or two or any group of quarterbacks that you believe that you would trade up for if you are Ryan Pace. So if you are going to make a move into the top 10, top 5, are there any guys that you would trade into? I know there are some that I would stay away from, but I'm bringing you on. Is there anybody in that category?
Yeah, so I feel like one guy in particular that I feel pretty confident in trading up for is Justin Fields out of Ohio State. I don't know exactly where he's going to go because that third pick is so unpredictable at this point. It could really be any of Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Mac Jones. So there's so much up in the air for me to definitively say, okay, Justin Fields is going to fall. The Bears should target him at here because he might not even be available and the Bears might not even have a chance. But say if the 49ers go with Trey Lance or Mac Jones, then there's a possibility that Justin Fields is available around that pick 6 range, maybe that 5 or 6 area. The Bears could hypothetically move up there, give up a future first as well as some other, draft capital and secure their guy. I'd be totally okay with that. I mean, I'm generally of the thought that you should trade down more often than you trade up, but I feel like with Justin Fields or just a quarterback you feel really good with in general, I feel like that's an exception you should be able to make just because of how important that position is. And I mean, come on, it's the Chicago Bears. They haven't had a stable, good quarterback in decades, like
lifetimes.
Yeah, literally. I think like Sid Luckman, maybe. That's how far back we're talking here. So there's got to be that obvious thirst to get a quarterback. So I definitely move up for Justin Fields because I feel like he's pro ready and he has a very high ceiling in terms of his dual threat ability, his overall accuracy, his poise in the pocket, all that jazz. And then another guy I'd maybe consider moving up for is Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Now that one I don't feel as strong about because he's a 1-year FCS starter who only has 1 game of film in the last 12 months. And that 1 game wasn't very good. So I can totally understand being hesitant to move up for him. And I'm not as, okay, we need to get this guy. I'm not in that same mindset with Lance as I am with Fields. But I still think that Trey Lance has one of, if not the highest ceilings in this class. I think that his arm talent, his dual threat ability, his mobility in and out of the pocket, I mean, it's unmatched in this class. And with that alone and the flashes of deep ball accuracy that he's shown, I feel like if it'll take a year or two, but the Bears do have Andy Dalton they can start for 2021 and let Trey Lance kind of adjust to the game. They have that situation. Trey Lance can afford to sit for a little bit and learn in an NFL system and underneath a veteran quarterback. I think that would be a good landing spot for him. Again, that's a much riskier move than Justin Fields, in my opinion, because I feel like Justin Fields is, a day 1 starter. You feel a lot more secure about moving up for him. Trey Lance, there's this huge boomer bust factor, but I'd consider it for Trey Lance. I'd be a little bit more patient in wanting to move up for Trey Lance. Like I wouldn't go out of my way to move up for Trey Lance over Justin Fields. Like I'd much prefer Justin Fields. But Trey Lance, he's still a very talented prospect and he has a very high ceiling at the next level. So in that case, I'd at the very least consider it.
Nick, how about you? What quarterback question do you want to throw Jacob's way?
Yeah, Jacob, I'm on the impression that the Bears probably won't move up, even if there's a quarterback available on that day 1. But day 2 gets interesting. I think the 2 guys that always get brought up, Davis Mills, Kellen Mond, who do you like there? And why? I think like Will and I have talked about Mon being a potential guy, but who is your preference if they're both available? The Bears are still looking for a quarterback. Which one are you taking?
Man. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest. I'm not too enthralled with either of them as day 2 picks. I can see the argument for going late round 3, but I don't see either of them as second round prospects, especially with a Bears team that has as many needs as it has as many deficiencies on both sides of the ball in terms of youth. And you can make the argument that, of course, quarterback is the most important position, but the way I generally view it is if a quarterback is either ready enough to contribute from day 1 or they have a high enough ceiling to be a star, then they're going to go in round 1. That's just the way that I look at it. Obviously, in the case of like a Davis Mills, he hasn't had as much game tape, and that's, I think, what's holding him back, and past injuries and stuff like that. But I would take him over Kellen Mond. I do think that in terms of accuracy, arm strength, maybe Mond has the upper hand slightly, but I think Davis Mills has shown more consistent accuracy, more consistent poise in the pocket, better ability to read the field. So I would take Davis Mills. I wouldn't go out of my way to like move up into the first round for them. I know that that's been a speculation thing that's been, kind of put out there recently, but, I wouldn't do that. But say if Davis Mills is available with that third round pick, I would do that. Second rounder, I'm not so sure. Maybe if you move back and he's still there, I don't know. And I recognize the NFL is much higher on that type of quarterback than I am. And I'm sure that Davis Mills, Kellen Mond, maybe even Kyle Trask will all go a lot higher than I, have them graded at or where I would take them at. But that's just my personal preference. And again, they're talented players. There's, a decent amount to like in both Mills and Mond, but I think that Davis Mills gets the edge for me.
Not that I like it, because I'm a little bit more on the Mond train. But
Okay.
when it comes to even later in the draft, because my next question is going to be, would you take anybody at 52? Doesn't sound like it. It's either if you trade up. So actually, let's go back a step. In the first round, any quarterback even worth it at 20 that's even realistically going to fall? I don't think anyone would. But would that just be a Mac Jones type if somehow he did fall? I'm just because, again, if you don't get a quarterback in rounds 1 or 2, you're looking at the Andy Dalton show here more than likely in 2021.
Yeah, so with that 20 pick, again, I don't expect either or any of the top 5 quarterbacks to fall that far. But if Mac Jones does fall, then I'd take him. And I'm saying that as a guy that's not super high on Mac Jones, admittedly. I think his ceiling is average NFL starter. But at the same time, for a later first-round pick like that, I think that's a very good investment. From just his ability to step in right away, his accuracy, his overall ability to read the field, doesn't have the highest physical ceiling. Far from it, in fact. But I do think that he's very accurate. He has a great deep ball accuracy, I should say. And just the ability to stand tall in the pocket and be poised and not, panic in the face of pressure. I like that a lot about him. So if Mac Jones were to fall hypothetically to 20, I'd take him. If not, I don't know if I'd go out of my way. I think that if the Patriots pass on him at 15, then maybe I'd start looking, okay, it's, 16, 17, 18, whatever. You can maybe start looking to move up and give up a little bit to just secure that you have a guy. Then, because I think that there's a pretty big gap between Mac Jones and then someone like Mills or Mond.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I'd move up just a little bit, but I wouldn't go out of my way and say, okay, this guy is going to be our franchise guy. We're going to move heaven and earth to get him. I feel like that's more of a, we weren't expecting him to fall. Let's go for it. Why not?
I see that Nick has entered the chat. That's that put a smile on my face, getting in there on YouTube, man. That's always fun. Jacob, say the Bears don't take a quarterback day 1 or day 2, so we're sitting there on Saturday, day 3. Do you have a favorite mid to late round quarterback prospect that the Bears could be potentially interested in, or that you see as a interesting fit as like a more of a developmental type of guy?
Yeah, so I'm going to go in 2 different directions here. I actually have 2 guys that I kind of want to bring up. One of them is Jamie Newman. I out of Wake Forest. He transferred to Georgia but never played a game there. So I think technically you call him from Wake Forest, but I don't know. Regardless, he didn't play in 2020. He didn't play his best at the Senior Bowl, and I think he's 23, so he's a bit older for a draft prospect. But all that aside, I think that his arm strength is one of the best in the class. His mobility, his overall ability to extend the play with his feet and pick up yards is very underrated. I see it's different body types, but I do see a Cam Newton running style with Jamie Newman because he's athletic. He, runs well in a straight line, but he's not afraid to run over a defender either. And that might panic some NFL defensive coordinators. It's like, oh, you're a quarterback, you should be sliding. But Jamie Newman's the type of guy he's going to lower the shoulder and fight for extra yards. But as far as a pure quarterbacking ability, I think that his arm talent is up there when you're comparing him to the rest of the class. A bit inconsistent in terms of accuracy. He's shown some really good flashes and some really bad flashes, and I think part of that comes from focusing too much on the first read and kind of panicking under pressure. I mean, we saw that at the Senior Bowl in the game itself and in practice where he was under pressure and he felt the need to just get the ball off, or he just panicked and got a sack. Regardless, I do think that Jamie Newman has some tools to work with. He's definitely a work in progress. But if the Bears, say, haven't taken a quarterback, it's round 5, and Jamie Newman's still on the board, I'd absolutely consider it because I feel like they haven't really taken a shot at any of those developmental toolsy types since Ryan Pace has been there, arguably even since before then. I'm trying to think of like a Nathan Enderle or Dan Lefevre or something.
Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a while. So I'd be all for Jamie Newman in like the 5th round just to give him a shot, see what he has. Another guy I want to bring up real quick is Sam Ellinger out of Texas. I don't feel like he's as high ceiling of a Jamie Newman type, but I do feel like his ties with Tom Herman, who's in the Bears organization as an offensive analyst, I think that Herman could give them a unique inside perspective about that no other team has. And I like Ellinger's tape. I mean, he's not the flashiest guy out there. He's not the biggest, doesn't have the biggest arm. He does have solid athleticism, and I'm really impressed with his toughness in the pocket. He isn't afraid of pressure. He's able to set his feet and still deliver a nice ball, even though he's getting whether it be a blitz or just, collapsing pocket. He stands tall, and he's a tough guy, and he's a high character dude. And I'm sure that there are a lot of quarterbacks in this class who are high character. I'll just preface that by saying that. But hearing him speak at the Senior Bowl and having the chance to go to his pro day, he carries himself very well. So I just figured, I'd throw that in there. It's not necessarily saying the guys I've talked about aren't high character. It's just that I've had the chance to talk to Sam Ellinger, and he seems like a high character guy. So that disclaimer out of the way, I think that he'd be a solid backup option. And I think that he could have a career actually somewhat similar to maybe like a Josh McCown or a Brian Hoyer, where you stick around the league for a while. Maybe you don't stick around with one team for a long time, but he can develop into a spot starter or a high-end backup, and that'll get you some comp picks in free agency down the line.
I know one from Texas as well, Colt McCoy.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Colt McCoy's been in the league for a while, hasn't he?
He has, and yeah, I feel like I see him randomly on a sideline from whatever team that year. I'm like, oh, he's still around? Cool. But yeah, I think that's a good comp maybe for you to think through. Regardless, everything seems like what we already kind of know. It's going to be very difficult for the Bears to find themselves a good quarterback here in this draft. Heck, this whole offseason, unfortunately. Nick, I want to move over to wide receiver. Do you want to kick things off with that one?
Yeah, well, I thought you were going to say everything's on the table. I felt like that was a setup for what you were about to say.
I'm trying not to use that phrase as much.
I know, we've heard it enough in the offseason with the Bears. But yeah, Jacob, moving away from quarterback, because we're going to hear that up until Thursday, and obviously when the draft is actually going on. This is a deep wide receiver class, and I feel like there's a bunch of good guys that can definitely help the Bears. Who are some of your favorite prospects, whether it's on day 1 or day 2, rounds 2 and 3? who do some guys that you like in this wide receiver class?
Yeah, so with this wide receiver class, one guy I really like, and with this wide receiver class, I'll just say this right out of the gate. I wouldn't take a wide receiver at 20 unless it's one guy, and that's Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. I mean, assuming that like Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle are all off the board, Rashad Bateman's the one guy that I'd take there at 20. I feel like he's got Pro Bowl potential at the next level. He could be a legit 1,000-yard receiver. I'm really impressed with how strong his hands are, how physical he is at the catch point, and just how crafty he is as a route runner. He's not the fastest guy out there. I mean, he's a good athlete, don't get me wrong. But he wins a lot more with precision in his footwork and his cuts and how he adjusts his stems so that he can attack weak blind spots and coverage. So it's like, oh, I'm going to make you think I'm running it out, and then I'm going to run it in. And then the cornerback's like, whoa, what are you doing? You know, I really thought that you were going to be going towards the sidelines there. You caught me for a loop. But yeah, I'm a really big fan of Rashad Bateman. He's the one guy I'd be perfectly fine with the Bears taking at 20. Otherwise, I recommend they just wait it out until day 2 if they're going to take a wide receiver, just because of how deep this class is. I mean, and one thing that I really like from a Bears perspective is how deep the class is in terms of slot receivers. Mm-hmm. In terms of those shiftier, faster guys who can change direction quickly, you can line them up outside, sure, and they have that versatility if need be, but they're primarily slot receivers, which with Anthony Miller being on the trading block, I think that that's a great fit for the Bears if they choose to go in that direction. Elijah Moore is a guy that I like on round 2. He's definitely one of the most explosive receivers in this class on film. Just the ability he brings after the catch and his shiftiness coming in and out of his breaks and making guys miss with, you know, great vision and lateral quickness after the catch. I've seen rumors about him going maybe round 1. I don't buy that just yet, but I would really like him on round 2. I feel like if he does fall there to 52, then he would be a really good option. Two other guys I like, I should say, are Amari Rodgers out of Clemson and Dwayne Estridge out of Western Michigan. So those are two guys that I'm a fan of. I think that Amari Rodgers, he's shifty. Absolutely. I'm going to say this about a lot of guys. They can change directions so well. At first, I'll admit that I wasn't too sold on his route running ability heading into the Senior Bowl, but he looked really good and really crisp coming in and out of his breaks. So that made me go back to the tape, and while the tape still wasn't necessarily as good at this, you know, as it was in the Senior Bowl, I will trust that development. And I do think that he has the raw athleticism to continue to grow as a route runner. And then Dwayne Estridge is just so much fun to watch. I mean, sure, he's older for a wide receiver prospect. I want to say 23 or 24, something like that. So, you know, there are those age concerns. I'm not trying to sound like ageist or anything, but that's the reality of the draft. Teams aren't going to be, you know, they're going to be a little more hesitant to draft guys who are 23, 24, even older in certain cases. But regardless, I think Estridge is just a phenomenal talent, really good athlete, super agile after the catch. Maybe I don't think his testing numbers really did him justice. I feel like he did a lot better on tape after the catch and making guys miss than he tested out at his pro day. Also has value as a kick returner. He was a pretty dang good returner for Western Michigan in 2020. And with Cordero Patterson gone, who knows who's going to step in that role. So I think that's a sneaky, I wouldn't say it's a big need, but I do think it's a sneaky need that the Bears could consider, especially when they're looking for like a running back or a wide receiver, or maybe even a cornerback. We'll see. But I feel like they could factor in kick return ability at some point this year too.
Now, I don't have like a big board or rankings in front of me. So for Estridge, give or take, where do you think he could or should go?
Yeah, so with Estridge, I'd honestly take him in round 3, but I wouldn't be mad if they took him in round 2. I wouldn't be off the walls excited if the Bears took Dwayne Estridge in round 2, but I'd be like, okay, I mean, I can see that. All right, we can work with that. Round 3, though, that's when I start to get into ecstatic territory, because I just think he's so much fun to watch, and there's a lot of potential there. And he's shown some promise in terms of route running. And he's a tough runner too. I want to say he's like 5'9", but he's not like a skinny 5'9". He's built, so he can, run over guys as well as he can run around them. So he's a guy I really like as well, but I think round 3 is probably the best range for him. Whether he'd fall to the Bears pick at round 3, I don't know, but I think you never know. It's the draft. Anything can happen.
Sure can. By the way, I love that you brought up Elijah Moore. I had him in my first mock draft, and it wasn't a first round. I don't think I started the rumor mill just with our one little mock draft show, but he was ranked pretty high in the big boards and simulators I was using, and I liked what I saw. I got Nick at the time was like, get out of here. And then a week later, he's hopped on the train a little bit. So I was glad to hear he's somewhat on your radar as well. I want to switch to offensive tackle. Because that's another big pressing need right now for the Bears. And I know there's a lot of just talk and the consensus about, Tevin Jenkins, if he's there at 20, you take him. So first of all, I'm curious about your thoughts on that, and say he's off the board, or maybe someone is like in that fringe territory of falling. Who are just some candidates in round 1 for the Bears at this tackle position?
Yeah. So, Tevin Jenkins has been the most popular target for the Bears in a lot of mock drafts, especially in the Chicago area. A lot of us as, people who like to write about the Bears or, do podcasts and videos and all that stuff, we all know that they're looking for an offensive tackle at some point in the draft, or at least they should be. And Tevin Jenkins,
we don't know that. We don't know. And giving what we know about the team, they'll probably avoid it. They'll just draft like 5 centers, and then we'll be like, what?
Yeah, they'll be like, okay, you guys you fight amongst yourselves. We'll figure out the tackle position another year. We've got 3 centers. Look at us go. But yeah, I think that Tevin Jenkins, he's my personal favorite to go at number 20. If I were picking and he were on the board, he would be my pick. I just feel like he brings that next level of nastiness to his game, which is something the offensive line doesn't really have a ton of. I feel like Cody Whitehair is the closest thing the Bears have to like a truly nasty guard.
And that's mild.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the guys along the offensive line win with technique more so than they do with power. And that, that's not to knock Tevin Jenkins' technique. I think he uses his hands really well, and just his ability to adjust his angles and his pass sets is really impressive to me. But I think the power is the thing that I love, because he's got super strong hands that he can just use to jab you at the point of attack and then just overwhelm you and shut you down. And he's got enough power in his lower half to be able to drive guys into the dirt in the run game. And he's not a bad athlete on tape. I do think his pro day measurements might have been a bit skewed just based off of what I've seen on tape of his. And that's not saying he's a bad athlete. He's a pretty solid athlete, but I do think that he wins more with size and power. And I feel like that's something the Bears could need at right tackle. I feel like he's the type of guy who can step in day one and be an impact player.
Yeah, he's a fun guy to look into. And I know we keep talking about bringing the nasty. You need some of that. We haven't had that since, Kyle Long's rookie year, and then going back prior to that, Olin Karutz. It's been a while since you've had some of those players here in Chicago, without a doubt. Nick, any other offensive tackle early prospects you want to get some insight on, or just any general questions there?
Yeah, Jacob, what are your thoughts on the BYU offensive tackle Brady Christensen as a later round tackle? Let's say the Bears, they want to get some playmakers with the wide receiver, and maybe they draft a corner early on and they're waiting like they have done in the past with drafting some offensive linemen. They go with Brady Christensen. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I like Brady Christensen. I don't know exactly how high I'd take him. I'd start considering any time after the 3rd round personally, although I feel like he could go higher. And I get that he's going to be, again, he's another one of those prospects. He's a bit older. I want to say he's 24 because he served his Church of Latter-day Saints mission down in New Zealand after high school. So he is a bit older than the average draft prospect coming out, but just the physical tools that he brings, he's long, he's got long arms, and he's athletic. And that is something that I just love. Watching him on tape, that just shows up. He's, nimble in pass protection. He can change direction well. And he can accelerate well when climbing to the next level, which I like a lot in, a zone scheme like the one the Bears use in their offense. again, I don't know necessarily what type of blocking scheme we're going to see from the Bears this year because they ran a bit more inside zone near the beginning of the year. But as the year went on and Bill Lazor kind of took over, we did see a little bit more outside zone. But regardless, I do think that a guy like Brady Christensen with his mobility and just the length that he brings, I think that that's a really good combination going forward. And I think he could use a little bit of time to, bulk up and work within a, strength and conditioning program. But I do really like what he brings to the table. I wouldn't go completely out of my way to take him because this is, again, a really deep offensive tackle class. But I do like Brady Christensen. I think he can be a starter in the league for sure.
What about round 2? Cody Whitehair, James Daniels. I feel like this is just an area of the draft that Ryan Pace feels comfortable drafting offensive linemen. Would there be any tackles that you think could fall to number 52 that have a fringe round 1 to 2 grade on them, or just any round 2 guys in general that you could see as a potential fit?
Yeah, for sure. I actually have 3 guys in particular who kind of stand out who fit that bill. Samuel Cosme out of Texas is one guy. I think he will go higher than the Bears' second round pick. My guess is he goes either late first or early second. But if he does fall to 52, I think he's as slam dunk of a pick as you can get at that position. Just the mobility and the ease with which he plays for his size is really impressive. And, he's got some potential in terms of his upper body strength, a bit thin and a little bit stiff in terms of being a waist bender against a knee bender. But I do think that there's a lot to like with him. Dylan Radden's out of North Dakota State is a guy that I really like as well. And it's kind of similar to Cosme. I think that Radden's athletic ability really stands out on tape, but he also has a bit of a nasty edge to him. And he showcased at the Senior Bowl that, hey, I'm not just a product of me going up against FCS competition. I can play at the next level and I can dominate against Power 5 guys. So I'm not at all worried about his small school status or him being, only playing 1 game in 2020. But I think he's a guy they could target in round 2. And the other guy I'm sure a lot of Bears fans will really like because of the ties with the college is Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame. I don't think he's as high of a ceiling type guy as Cosme or Radden's because both of those guys are more athletic on film. But I do think that Eichenberg he fits that Notre Dame kind of mold where they're all pretty technically sound.
Right.
And I think Eichenberg, he's the strongest of the 3 guys that I mentioned. I think that overall from, top to bottom, he has a very well-proportioned frame and packs a mean punch at the point of attack. And I like the way he uses his hands. He's, pretty accurate in terms of his placement, and he's active in terms of wanting to fight for that inside leverage. So I think Liam Eichenberg might be the most polished out of those 3 guys. Could he be available at 52? I think he could be. And there is a possibility all 3 of those guys go before 52 just because of the need for offensive tackle around the league. But I feel really happy if the Bears came away with either of those 3 guys, assuming they didn't go offensive tackle in round 1 already.
Really good stuff there, Jacob. Nick, anything else at this position from your perspective?
No, I see in our notes, though, Will, that we're going to move over to the defense. So I'm going to get started with that there, Will. And I think, Jacob, for me personally, when I was seeing maybe early on mock drafts where the Bears are going defensive guys, in that first round, I was like, whoa, the Bears have too many needs on offense to maybe be thinking about a cornerback. But then, as you kind of do more film study, you get to see okay, well, if, Greg Newsome is there at, pick 20, maybe you're thinking about that. What are your thoughts on maybe the Bears potentially drafting the successor to Kyle Fuller with the 20th overall pick? And what are some guys that you like there if they were potentially to fall? And just the cornerback position in general with that first round pick.
Make sure you mention Caleb Farley because you threw him out there, which got me excited. And again, if you just got rid of Kyle Fuller, you may as well replace him with someone from the same school. And again, it's just like the Texas talk we had earlier. It just makes so much sense.
It does. It really does. But yeah, Caleb Farley is one of the guys I was going to mention there. And while I would prefer going along the offensive line at 20, I do think that if the value's right at corner, I'd be perfectly okay with that. Caleb Farley's a guy I really like. I have him as my corner 2 in this class still. even with the concerns about his injury, it's like a microdiscectomy or something like that. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I'm not like a doctor or anything, but it's something. I know, right? Got like a Dewey House situation over here. But it's something to do with his spinal cord. But, people who are much more in the know about that kind of stuff than I am, they recognize that, it's a minor injury and there's a pretty, strong chance that he's going to be able to come back to normal. So I'm a big fan of just the length, the fluidity, and the ball skills that Caleb Farley brings. And for a guy who's a bit newer to the cornerback position full-time, remember, he played quarterback in high school and was actually training to be a wide receiver before he tore his ACL in 2017, I think it was. That was his redshirt year. So he's still a bit newer to the cornerback position, but as we saw in 2019, he moves really well. He's come along really quickly in terms of his route recognition abilities. He can use his length to his advantage in jamming receivers, whether it's at the line of scrimmage or, near the top of their route, being pretty active without being called for pass interference penalties. And then just his ability to contort and track down the ball. I think Caleb Farley would be a very good pick for the Bears at 20. And again, it's an offense-heavy draft for a team that has a lot of needs on the offensive side of the ball. But I wouldn't mind Caleb Farley at 20. Another guy I want to bring up real quick is Greg Newsome out of Northwestern. Nicholas, you were talking a bit about him, and I think that he's, injuries aside, and I get that that's tough to do because he's had dealt with some sort of nagging injuries every single year at the collegiate level, and that's not something that should be ignored. And if you're going to take him, you need to do a lot of medical research on him. But hometown guy, which, can't hurt. But more importantly, he's long, he's super fluid, and he might be the smartest cornerback in this class. And, Northwestern, they're pretty well renowned for their academic success. And admittedly, I don't know if Greg Newsome, I don't know what his grades are, but just judging off of his ability to play on the football field, he seems like a very smart guy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's got a high GPA or anything. But that alone, route recognition skills are through the roof, ability to read a quarterback's eyes and determine when they're going to throw the ball and where they're going to throw the ball. I'm really impressed by it. And every time I watch him, I say, okay, does he have a copy of their playbook and know exactly what they're running every single time? Because that's what it seems like with him. And sure, maybe he's not a dynamic top speed guy. He ran well at his pro day, but there were times where he got beat deep in terms of long speed, but most of the time you're going to be going up against those shorter and intermediate routes. And Greg Newsome is incredibly fluid, and he's athletic enough to the point where he can take on those type of routes. So I have very little concerns about Greg Newsome at the next level. Injuries are one of those concerns, but Greg Newsome, again, would be a guy that I'd be okay with taking at 20.
What about pick 52? It could be an outside guy. It could be an inside guy. I know someone that Nick and I have talked about in the podcast that we like a lot is Elijah Molden. I'd be really curious to your thoughts on him as well.
Yeah, so with Elijah Molden, I do think that round 3 might be a little bit better for him, but that's not necessarily a slight on his end. I mean, he's still a very good prospect. In terms of just his nosiness, and his overall ability to, get his hand in there and enter the frame of an opposing receiver and make a play on the ball, I think he's one of the best in the class. I do like him a lot in the slot. Whether the Bears want to use that high of a pick on a guy who's probably going to project as a slot corner at the next level, I don't know. But all I know for a fact is that whoever drafts Elijah Molden is probably going to be getting a very high-end slot corner at some point in his career, just because he's patient, he's calculated, but is also aggressive in terms of when he makes his jumps on routes or when he tries to make a play on the ball. And he's a high motor guy. So you won't see him shying away from contact as a tackler, even though he's a bit smaller. And he's going to keep fighting to make a play on the ball no matter what, or no matter who he's going against. So with Elijah Molden, I can see him going in the second round, and I wouldn't be mad if he went at 52 at all. I do think he's a better fit in round 3. But again, I still think he's a very talented player.
Any other maybe middle to later round slot guys that you would see the Bears being interested in? I say that knowing that they already have a couple mid-round draft picks that are been here for a while that could project into that spot, but based off of what I've seen, and Jacob, I'm assuming what you've seen as well, I don't think you can really hang your hat on any of them being the answer to replace, I was going to say Buster Screen, but really we're still trying to replace Bryce Callahan.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if they try and add some sort of competition in there with, Duke Shelley or Kindle Vilder. Two guys in particular that I think could stand out for the Bears is, Thomas Graham out of Oregon and Avery Williams out of Boise State. I'll start with Thomas Graham Jr. He was a guy that I really loved watching at the Senior Bowl, and I think that he could play outside or inside, honestly, but I'd personally keep him in the slot just because of, that's where I think he plays best. I think he's got, very good route recognition skills. I keep touting that because there are a lot of cornerbacks who don't necessarily know what's coming. And that often leads to issues with, okay, how often does this guy watch film? How often does he, break down opposing defenses or opposing offenses rather? And I can look at Thomas Graham Jr. and say, okay, this guy, studies, he works his butt off in the film room. And he's fluid. I think that maybe not the most elite athlete in terms of straight line speed, but I do think he's very fluid, and he's a reliable tackler too. So he's the type of guy who's, a bit scrappy out there in the nickel. And I think, they kind of have a guy who's like scrappy like that in Kindle Vilder, but at the same time, he's also played more outside, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
than he has on the inside because of injuries. So I don't even know if the Bears truly project him as a nickel or if they just perceive him as, depth to have along the outside at that field side cornerback spot. So I don't know, but I do know, though, that Thomas Graham Jr. is a pretty talented guy, and he definitely showed out at the Senior Bowl. And as for Avery Williams, he's another one of those guys where if you're looking on day 3, then you become a much more attractive prospect if you have experience or value on special teams. And Avery Williams might just be the best return man in this class. I want to say that he's had 6 punt returns for touchdowns in 4 years and 3 touchdowns as a kickoff returner. I mean, He's just absolutely electric with the ball in his hands, which makes me think, okay, could he be in like that Jamal Agnew sort of role where he starts off as a corner and move him to receiver, whatever you want to do with him? But regardless, I do think that get the ball in his hands as a returner, but he's also a very fluid athlete coming out of the slot. And he does a good job of accelerating downhill and coming down with that straight line speed to, either jump on a route or to make a play as a tackler. And again, with a lot of these slot corners, you're not going to see like truly big guys, but he's willing as a tackler. And is he raw in terms of his overall instincts and feel for the game? Yeah, but he's shown promise. I like his ability to make sure to kind of create a facade about what his blind spot is, and then, lead a receiver in the opposite direction. And then he's fluid enough to the point where that doesn't necessarily matter. He can flip his hips, go across his body, and make a play on the ball regardless. So Avery Williams is a guy I really like on day 3. I don't know exactly if you're wanting him to be a starter in the slot at the next level, but at the very least, he's solid depth and a guy who can really contribute on special teams.
Now, Jacob, you mentioned, Agnew going from corner, return specialist to offense. Nick, can you name anyone else who's done that in their career before?
There's probably a couple people I can name, but yes, I know what you're alluding to there, Will.
Then say it.
Do I have to?
You don't
actually
know,
no, Jacob. I want to go. I want to go real quick because I think this is we were talking about Mobile and just some of the players there, and I just want to know in this process when you're watching all these prospects, who's the one guy that you're like, man, he keeps on making plays for me. And I actually was watching this with Andrew Freeman from Bear Report when we were in Mobile. We kept watching Quinn Miners. His tape, and my goodness, there's so many times where can we rewatch that? Can we watch that again? Can we put it on replay? We had insomniac cookies when we were doing it, and we just kept on watching his highlight tape. Was there a prospect? Maybe it was Miners from Wisconsin Whitewater, but was there anybody that you just kept on just wanting to watch, or just was infatuated with what they were able to do on the football field?
Yeah, I mean, I love to talk about Miners for a little bit, just because that's, you know, one of my draft crushes in this class. I came into the Senior Bowl, you know, oh, he's a Wisconsin Whitewater guy, you know, small school, but they are known for being, you know, mean in the trenches and having, you know, that very good offensive line and, you know, tough blue collar guys. Quinn Miners is just so much fun to watch. He is an absolute beast out there. He just demolishes people at the point of attack. He's so strong, and he's like low to the ground too. He does a great job of getting his weight underneath him, and he's got a powerful frame. I mean, we saw at the Senior Bowl, he was letting his gut hang out. There's a lot of him there. So as far as just the nasty temperament that he plays with, the technique that he shows, for especially for a smaller school guy, is really impressive to me. And his overall awareness and IQ, man, I could see him going round 2. I definitely think so. And is that reactionary? I don't think so, because he had really good tape in 2019, and he was able to showcase at the Senior Bowl, okay, I belong in the NFL. I'm not just some, you know, a small school guy who's dominating against, you know, less than ideal competition. I'm for real. I can go pro and I can start in the league. So Quinn Miners is a guy that I love, and I'm really happy you brought him up, just because I love any excuse that I have to talk about him.
He's awesome, and him lifting, you know, logs and, you know, making his own weight room and in like the wilderness. It's like that's awesome. And like the gut hanging out, like when we were in, you know, at the Senior Bowl practices, you know where he's at all times, because you just see that big round belly. And I think he got injured for one of the practices. You're like, no, we want more Miners, you know? So yeah, he's an awesome player to watch.
Yeah. And he also has a pet snake. I found that out recently. I saw some sort of tweet. He was having an interview with NFL Network, and he was talking about he and his girlfriend have a pet python. And I'm thinking, like, if this guy couldn't get even more interesting, I mean, he just did right now. So that stuff aside, absolutely, he's a killer player on the field. I just love watching him go to work.
Jacob, we've hit on all the bigger needs that the Bears have. There's more. We have positions like edge, center, tight end. If you're looking down the road, inside linebacker. Safety, a long-term answer, not Tashawn Gibson, although I'm glad he's back for a year. We just know that's not a long-term approach to counter Eddie Jackson. So I'm just curious, you don't have to give me a huge laundry list, but out of those positional groups, are there any prospects that you like over the rest, or does any one of those that just feel like, you know, really good fits that the Bears could have a chance, you know, whether it's, you know, later in the draft, or maybe they just want to go and get another second-round tight end? I don't know. You tell me. Any players in those lesser needs areas that you've liked to look into and think could fit on the Bears?
Yeah, well, so there's one guy in particular that I kind of want to touch on. He's a tight end, and I'm looking at, with Jimmy Graham, where he's at right now, he's going to be sticking around for 2021, barring some, you know, last-minute unforeseen release or anything, which I don't really see happening at this point. But you've got him. He's a big-bodied tight end. He's a guy with very good ball skills, at least in his prime, very athletic, and, you know, a bit raw coming out of Miami, who doesn't have a ton of starting experience. And for me, and I'm not going out and saying that this guy is going to be Jimmy Graham, because obviously that's a really high bar to reach, but a guy I can see some similarities to is Zach Davidson out of Central Missouri. He's 6'7", about 245, and he had the chance to participate at Mizzou's Pro Day, and he put on a clinic. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think he ran in the 4.6s in his 40-yard dash, which for a guy that size is impressive. And then after I saw his numbers, I'm like, okay, I got to turn on the tape on this guy. I got to see what I can find. And there are just so many instances of him not only going over guys to make grabs and fighting through contact and just demolishing guys at the catch point, but he's also a fluid athlete, and he's an effective threat on the seam who can flip his hips well. I've seen him make guys miss after the catch too. And I don't know necessarily how often that's going to work at the NFL level, but I do think that his athletic ability, his size, his raw ball skills are all there. If you can teach him a little bit of blocking technique, if you can teach him to be a little bit more crisp in his routes, then I think you've got a real sleeper on your hands. I feel like with that athletic upside, he's the type of guy you sit for a year and say, okay, maybe you can look at him as a long-term complement to Colt Mccoy and then have that 1-2 punch of the tight end position that, a team like Philly's had with Ertz and Goddard's, a team like New England is trying to get now with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. I mean, there are examples of these 1-2 punches, and I feel like the Bears, if they get Zach Davidson, they could potentially get that.
That's interesting. I'll have to look into him a little bit more. That's really enticing. You mentioned the word sleeper. I want to give the opposite. Are there any players that you're to say, please stay away from at all costs that either you've seen associated with the Bears in mock drafts, that you've looked into, and you're just like, please, for the love of God, do not draft that guy?
Yeah, so quarterbacks aside, I don't want to, touch on that because we've already talked a bit about that. One guy that I've seen mocked to the Bears around round 2-ish that I'm personally not a huge fan of is Diami Brown out of North Carolina, the wide receiver. And I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on the guy because he has talent and I think he can be a decent enough starter in the league. But I look at him, I don't really see anywhere where he's all great. I think he's decent at a lot of things. I think he's got decent size. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but his size is passable. He's good in contested catch situations, but he's not like a bully or anything. Solid athlete. I don't think he's necessarily a great one. Can he stretch the field vertically? Can he make guys miss in the open field? I don't know. It just seems like he's the type of guy that I kind of project as like a high-end wide receiver 3. And, that's totally fine. But if you've got Darnell Mooney on the roster, yeah, he's a talented player. You could still find an upgrade from him and then have Mooney as one of the best wide receiver 3s in the league. That's just the way I view it. If you're taking a receiver in round 2, you're looking for a guy who can eventually grow into that number 2 role. And I don't know if Diami Brown can be that guy. I don't think he'll be bad, but I just don't really see him being that round 2, early day 2 prospect that a lot of guys are kind of putting him in right now. And again, I'll preface that he's not a bad player. He's just not a guy that I'd particularly want the Bears taking in round 2.
Sure. Exactly why I asked the question. I appreciate that. Nick, is there anything else for Jacob on your end? I just have one final question, but I just want to give you the floor one last time in case.
No, I'll just say this before you ask your final question there, Will. What's more impressive than, Jacob just having this vast knowledge on all these players is like, I don't think at one point, almost going to hit an hour here, I don't think you've taken a swig of water, which is, maybe you haven't, maybe I just wasn't paying attention. That's impressive in itself. So, Jacob, you're awesome. And like Will said earlier on the show, if you're not following Jacob, just, go ahead and do that. Because you look at the knowledge that we're getting here and learning about players that, are in the later rounds. You're going to get that with Jacob every single time.
Yeah, you can find him on Twitter at Jacob Infante. That's at Jacob Infante 24, JACOBINFANTE 24. I had that coming up in a couple seconds, Nick, but you beat me to it. Jacob, the last question I have is ultra serious, and it's a little bit more personal. What advice do you have for me when I'm going through my final mock draft here over the weekend for our next episode? I'm real curious. Maybe the advice is better for Ryan Pace a week from tonight, but any advice as I go through my exercise one last time?
Yeah, so my personal philosophy in terms of going for draft picks, and I recognize that Ryan Pace definitely doesn't do this, and some other GMs around the league definitely don't do this, but I'm a big fan of trading down. I'll just say that unless you can get a Tevin Jenkins or even like a Rashad Bateman or anything like that, I feel like with this class, if you move back a little bit in the first round, you can pick up like, third or fourth round picks, stuff like that. Where I think the Bears are at right now is, yes, they have a defense that's ready to win now and some pieces on offense, but what are they going to be in 2-3 years? And Ryan Pace, I see Nicholas making that face. I feel the same way. In 2 or 3 years, I don't know how many of these guys will still be around. within the organization. Because how many star players do they have on rookie contracts right now? Like Roquan Smith is entering the final year of his rookie deal.
Yep.
James Daniels has been solid. Anthony Miller didn't pan out. And then you're looking at like maybe Bilal Nichols, but his contract's up at the end of this year. Cole Kmet, David Montgomery. I mean, we still have more to see out of these guys before we can say, all right, they can stick around for a second contract. So Ryan Pace has done a pretty good job of drafting. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. Sure, he's messed up in terms of positional value, but in getting mid-round to late-round sleepers, he's better than most GMs in the NFL. So my philosophy is, okay, you're a good drafting GM. Stock up on more picks. So, I mean, that's just my opinion. But if you're looking to stay put, if you're looking to just stick with the selections that you have, because I know that trading down, that's a really tough exercise to try and project because, it takes two to tango. There are so many different directions you can go there. But as you're doing your mock draft, I say value over need, because as tempting as it might be sometimes to go, okay, Bears need quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver, in that order. I'm going to go in that order with these draft picks. Sometimes the board doesn't fall that way. Sometimes if there's a prospect that you like who's still on the board that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be at 20, say if it's a cornerback or something, or like I don't know, I wouldn't say center because it's not like a huge center class, and I don't think anyone's going to go that high, but a different position that's, kind of a minor need, but you have a really good player still available, you go with that, because at the end of the day, you're looking to get the best players available for your team. And obviously you'd secretly like for those players to be at a position of need, but ultimately what the best teams do is they prioritize value. So I think that just, value and not reaching for prospects. I think sticking with your gut on, which guys you like, regardless of position, within reason. I mean, you don't go, if you're the Bears, like taking an edge rusher really in round one. I don't think that's like, I'm not a big fan of something like that, but within reason, if you have a good player at a position of even a decent need, I think you should go for it.
Okay. So I wrote down BPA all the way. Good enough.
Okay. That sounds about right. That sums it up perfectly.
I think I used to say that a lot in this podcast when Pace first was like GM. And like you said, it doesn't always pan out. Like he's even said, Mister, I'm going to draft a quarterback every year.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one come to fruition either. Speaking of trading down, one final question, because it really got my mind back to when I was younger and I was able to play video games a little bit more. Have you ever done the extreme trade downs in like the franchises of Madden, where you trade down 1 year? If you do it for another year, then you own like that third year of the draft. Like you're on the board, you have like 20 of the first round picks, you own the whole second and third round, then you just get to pick your own team. It's always fun doing that. It's a good exercise.
Yeah. Actually, over Christmas break, I want to say it was, we came back and I was playing a Madden Connected franchise with some of my buddies from school, and everyone got so mad at me because I kept like trading down and trading players and picking up draft picks. And they got to the point where like another one of my friends did this. Like he and I had like 25 out of the 32 picks just for ourselves in round one. So I'm well versed in that kind of philosophy and just spamming first round picks and second rounders in Madden. That's the way that I love to play my franchises.
Same.
Is it realistic? No, but it's a lot of fun.
And then at least when I play, I always do the Bears because just who I am. My kid gets annoyed by it so much. He's like, be anyone else when you play that game. No, like, sorry, I can't. But then you just have the Bears are now 9 o'clock, and it's like back to back. It's a lot of fun. So I'm glad someone else does the same thing. Nick's shaking his head like, wow.
I haven't played Madden so long. I actually have 2 copies over there. I don't even know where they came from. Madden 17 and Madden 09, and
Those
I
are
don't
about
know
the
where
same
they came
quality as the ones now.
from. Probably, right?
No difference. It's a roster update. You're good.
Yeah, for sure. But it does sound like a lot of fun to have that many picks and consecutively be on the board. Ryan Pace would love it.
He or he wouldn't. He'd trade them all away to go like one spot up. I don't know. But anyway, Jacob, it was an honor and a blast to have you on. It was a lot of fun. As we mentioned at the top, way overdue. But we finally were able to kind of make it all work. And I know I took away a ton of information. Nick was taking a ton of notes, I saw. And I'm certain our listeners feel exactly the same. So I just want to say thank you so much. I know you're helping a lot of Bears fans. And I know if you feel any way like I do, it's always a great feeling to know that you were able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about draft season. I mean, obviously, I love, getting down, watching tape, taking notes and all that, but I love interacting with people. And, if they have questions for me or, I am just spouting out something and maybe they either agree or disagree with me, I love that interaction. And I love, just knowing that, okay, people are, they like what I have to say. It's a really good feeling to have. And especially this draft season, it's like my, I don't know, my magnus opus, whatever, every year, everything that I'm, working towards builds up to this massive crescendo of those 3 days of me just going all out. And
yeah,
I don't get too much sleep those 3 days. I'm not going to lie, but it's worth it because I just love, being able to talk about what I love. And, I'm just grateful that people are listening to it.
I love it. I love it. I love your enthusiasm and really just your dedication to the draft. It's something that since we've connected over the past few years that I've noticed, and it's just tremendous. And like I said, that Sunday or even that Saturday night, you're going to come out with a tweet like, by the way, this may be a little early, but here are my top 10 players for next year. And I don't know if you have that list now or if you just pull it out later on or you're just delirious after 3 days. You just somehow like hallucinate and there they are. But it's tremendous. I know you just go from one draft class to the next and just keep it up, man. It's great stuff.
For sure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm taking that Sunday off. From draft talk. Maybe that next week I'll start to look into 2022 guys. I know who I want to watch. But again, I don't know if the Bears are taking a quarterback or not, what they're going to do. If they don't go high on a quarterback, I have a pretty decent short list on guys that I want to get to. I don't feel like there's a superstar in the 2022 class. There are a lot of guys who could potentially break out, though. I'll just say that.
By the way, as soon as you tweet that list on Sunday, the day you're taking off, I'm going to call you out. But
okay.
I'll put notifications on for you only on Sunday there on my phone. So we'll see what happens. But thanks so much, Jacob. As everyone knows, things are going to get pretty hectic here now that we're officially in draft week. Up next, Nick and I've kind of spoiled this already, but we're going to return for our final mock drafts of the year. Nick, you said we're going to make this an official mock draft Monday episode.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So Monday night, final mock drafts of the year. And of course, we'll be going live as soon as the Bears are on the clock every single time. So make sure to join the 7,000 plus Bears fans that subscribe to our YouTube channel for our live reaction and analysis of all of those picks. We'll be back soon with those mock drafts. A friendly reminder that the last time the Bears had a first round pick, I guessed Roquan Smith right, which I know made Nick very happy, right?
It was a good pick. I'm just mad that you got it right. That's just a pride thing, and it always will be.
Always will be. You're just still PO'd because you picked Mahomes to the Bears, and we're not there. But we can talk about that on Monday night. Until then, bear down, Chicago.